There is a time, and it doesn't often come with fireworks or some dramatic epiphany, when it all comes to a stop. The commotion dies down, the distractions are gone, and that person who's been running, the one who believed they were safe by remaining at arm's length, by keeping love at bay, they sense the quiet, they sense the hollow, and that is the moment that they realize something's lacking, not something external, not the car, not the job, not the thrill, but someone. See, for years, they convinced themselves they didn't need anyone. I'm fine alone. I'm better off this way. I don't do emotions. Sound familiar? Maybe you've said it yourself. What they were really saying was, I'm afraid to need, I'm afraid to trust, I'm scared to be seen, because when you open up, you give them the power to hurt you. And for a lot of people, that's the most terrifying thing in the world. So they constructed walls, beautiful, powerful, clever walls. They camouflaged them as independence, as power, as reason. But those walls, my friend, they did not keep out pain. They merely kept connection from seeping in. And one morning, that individual awakens and understands that the very thing they believed was holding them safely, depriving them of heat, of connection, of love, of life. And that's the wake-up call. The emotional reality smacking into them like a soft, inescapable wave. They see that they did not lose you because they weren't sufficient. They lost you because they did not want to risk being seen at all, of being vulnerable, flawed, human. And then suddenly, that avoidance, that emotional remove that previously had been so comfortable, begins to feel like a jail. Here's the reality: you can't numb one feeling without numbing all of them. You can't selectively tune out hurt and still feel happiness. You can't deny sorrow and still feel profound love. Life is not that simple. When you put up a wall so you won't get hurt, you also cut yourself off from everything lovely. You cut out laughter, intimacy, connection, and meaning. And finally, the avoidant comes to see, perhaps after losing someone they never imagined they would lose, that love wasn't the issue. Love was never the threat. Love was the mirror reflecting back to them the aspects of themselves they wouldn't confront. That's the emotional wake-up call. When they finally get it, that the fear had nothing to do with you or the relationship or commitment. It was about them, about their own unwounds that never healed, their own cycles, their own conviction that if they don't allow anyone to get too close, then they can't get hurt again. But here's what they never anticipated: the emptiness hurts more, the silence is deafening, that quiet becomes agonizing. Because at the core of every human being, no matter how self-sufficient, no matter how tough, there is a need to connect. It's programmed in. It's what we do. We're designed to love, to give, to grow with others. You can't outrun that design. You can only delay it until the agony of loneliness finally outweighs the fear of vulnerability. And in that moment of awakening, they begin to look. They begin to feel what they've been trying to escape all along: the truth. The truth that needing someone doesn't weaken you. It makes you human. Dependency isn't love. It's the stepping stone to growth. That control isn't love. It's suffocation. And when the avoidant finally knows that, when they let down the mask, when they say, I pushed you away because I was afraid, that's not failure, that's transformation. That's the first gasp of a soul preparing to heal. That's the dawning of authenticity, of truth, of a new strength, the strength to open, to feel, to connect once more. Because the true awakening isn't when they see they need you, it's when they see they need themselves, complete and unguarded, willing to love and be loved for real this time. It's a word we spend our entire existence attempting to circumvent. We construct rituals around it, diversions around it, rationales around it. We call it bad, something to eliminate, something to flee from, something to numb out. But here's the reality: pain is not your enemy. Pain is the most truthful teacher you will have in life. See, most people don't become bigger when life is easy. Ease doesn't stretch your ability to love, to forgive, to comprehend. Growth occurs when something aches, when something shatters, when that relationship dissolves, when that person leaves, when all the things you believed about the world and yourselves and everything that held you together suddenly disintegrate. That's when life begins to show you who you are. And here is where the avoidant learns the most difficult lesson of all. Avoidance is effective temporarily. It anesthetizes, it distracts, it keeps the hurt just beyond your grasp, safely tucked behind a door of reason or pride or business. But here is the thing about pain: it does not go away when you turn your back on it. It waits. It hangs around. It finds another entry point, until one day it's no longer a whisper you can drown out. It's a roar you can't ignore. That's when the avoidant will finally understand that pain wasn't attempting to kill them, it was attempting to wake them up. It was attempting to tell them, you're not living, you're surviving. For when you bypass feeling pain, you're also bypassing living. You begin to not take risks emotionally. You begin to no longer say, I love you first. You begin to not let people in. You become to exist inside this fortress of safety that gradually becomes your prison. But pain shatters that cage. It breaks the armor. It drags you back into life. Because every tear, every heartbreak, every sleepless night spent crying out why, it's not punishment. It's teaching. It's life shouting, pay attention. There is something here you need to learn. Perhaps it is self-worth. Perhaps it is patience. Perhaps it is the bravery to trust again. Whatever it is, pain is never arbitrary. It is specific. It knows exactly where you're resisting growth, and it presses there until you finally lean in. And when the avoidant leans in, when they cease to numb, cease to run, to act as if they don't care, something strong occurs. They start to truly feel the guilt, the remorse, the pining, all of it. And that sensation, as agonizing as it feels, is the start of healing, because you can't heal what you won't confront. Pain strips away the delusion that control is safety. It teaches you that control is just disguised fear. The more you fight to control love, the less you have it. The more you fight to control emotions, the more they control you. But as soon as you cease resisting the pain, as soon as you let it in and feel it all, it changes. It becomes wisdom. It becomes clarity. It becomes strength. You ever notice how individuals who've experienced the deepest suffering always talk with the greatest compassion? That's because pain humbles you. It educates empathy. It educates you that everyone you're going to meet is struggling with a battle that you can't see. And in understanding that, in knowing that you're linked to humanity in a way that no consolation ever will be, the avoidant ultimately realizes that fleeing from pain was actually fleeing from themselves, because pain does not come to destroy you. It comes to expose you. It's the fire that melts away what is false, the ego, the defense, the illusion, so that what is real can at last stand in the light. So if you're experiencing pain at this moment, do not curse it. Do not bury it. Sit with it. Listen, ask, what are you trying to teach me? Because pain always speaks, and when it does, you will discover that what previously seemed like the end was actually the beginning of becoming someone stronger, deeper, and more alive than you could ever have imagined. That's the power of pain. It's the most upfront, most intimate kind of love the universe has to offer. A hard love that doesn't whisper, one that changes you from the inside out. You can flee from a person, you can flee from a city, you can even flee from a memory. But here's the thing, you can't outrun what you're supposed to feel. Regardless of how quickly you move, regardless of how many distractions you create, emotions have a way of catching up, because what you resist will continue to pursue you until you finally sit down and address it. We inhabit a culture that values control. We're advised to move on, stay strong, don't look back. But what if the thing you're running from isn't behind you? It's inside you. What if all that emotion you've buried, the love, the pain, the regret, isn't gone at all? It's just waiting for you to turn around and see it. That's what becomes of the avoidant. They think if they just keep on moving, another job, another city, another relationship, they can outrun the feeling. But you can't outsmart emotion. You can't reason your way out of love. You can't evade heartbreak by suppressing it, because emotions don't respond to logic, they respond to truth. And truth doesn't disappear with time. It waits for acknowledgement. Sometime or other, something occurs, an odor, a melody, stillness in the midst of a routine day, and all of a sudden, everything they attempted to bury erupts once more. The recollection, the sensation, the tie they professed not to need. All returns, not to punish, but to remind them you cannot cure by evasion. You cure by presence. When you repress emotion, you don't annihilate it, you save it. You force it into your body, your mind, your behavior, and it manifests as tension, restlessness, anxiety, emotional exhaustion. You begin to snap at people for no apparent reason. You feel hollow even when everything's going right. That's not an accident. That's unresolved emotion struggling to be experienced, and it will continue to appear until you hear it, until you confront it, because emotions are messages. They're not there to command you, they're there to navigate you. Anger is saying, a boundary was crossed. Sadness is saying, something you cherished is gone. Love is saying, you found meaning. But when you flee those messages, when you silence them, you lose your internal compass. You drift, you live half alive. That's the tragedy of avoidance. It grants you temporary power, but permanent isolation. You think you've stayed safe, but what you've actually done is bartered peace for numbness. And numbness is not safety, it's gradual self-abandonment. You may change your environment, but not your condition. You may entomb the past, but not the lesson. Wherever you are, there you are, with the same emotions, the same fear, the same half told stories in need of resolution. That's why healing never begins with leaving home. It begins by looking within. And when the avoidant finally gets out of flight, when they finally stay still long enough to experience all they've been avoiding, something miraculous occurs. They find the emotion they most dreaded doesn't kill them. It liberates them, it mollifies them, it reconnects them to who they actually are under all the defenses. Because the heart doesn't require perfection, it requires permission. Permission to feel, to hurt, to heal, to love again. All the emotions that you have ever repressed are just energy waiting to be expressed. When you finally release it in tears, in truth, in forgiveness, it does not make you less strong. It makes you human again. And in that, there is your greatest strength. You can't run away from love. You can't run away from sorrow. You can't run away from what is true. But when you turn around and face that which was chasing after you, when you confront it head on, you realize it wasn't there to destroy you. It was there to repair you. For the minute you finally stop running from your heart is the minute it ceases to control you. That's when the healing starts. That's when life unfolds once more. That's when you recall that hurting so much is not the end of your story. It's the start of becoming real. Love, it's the one thing everyone claims to desire. But when it does stand before them, raw and real, they begin to recoil, they begin to draw back. They start to say, I'm not ready, or I need space, or I'm just not built for this. But the truth is, love was never the problem. Love isn't a threat, it's a mirror, and that's exactly why it scares people. See, love forces you to see you, not the airbrushed, perfected, assured self you present to the world, but the one that's still mending, the one that gets triggered, the one that needs to flee when life becomes too authentic. Love mirrors every phobia, every insecurity, every hurt you've attempted to hide. And that mirroring can be agony if you haven't forgiven yourself yet, which is why the avoidant retreats when love comes in too close. Because love doesn't merely speak the words, I see you. Love says, I see everything. And when someone spent their entire life trying to conceal those deeper pieces to dictate how they're seen, the level of vulnerability feels like threat. But it's not threat, it's truth. And truth, when received, is the most potent force of change there is. Love isn't here to kill you. It's here to unveil you, to stretch you, to expose the parts of you that still require healing. And if you allow it, love will take you to the very places where fear still resides within you, so you can finally let it go. The issue is that most individuals confuse that discomfort for an indication that something's amiss. They get triggered and they say to themselves, this cannot be right. No, that is love working. That is love standing in front of that mirror and saying, look here. Here is where you still protect yourself. Here is where you no longer trust. Here is where you're still afraid. When love pushes you, it's not rewarding you, it's challenging you to grow. It's asking, can you remain open when you're frightened? Can you keep your heart tender when your history teaches you to close it up? Because that's where true intimacy starts. The avoidant comes to realize that love wasn't the danger they had feared. The danger was their own mirror. They didn't fear you. They feared they might see themselves in your eyes. Because love tends to reveal our light and our shadow simultaneously. It insists on honesty. It requires vulnerability. It calls for presence. And that's a terror to one who has survived by being disconnected. But when they finally get that love is the mirror, not the monster, something happens. They cease to resist it. They cease to analyze it. They cease to try to dictate how it appears. And for the first time, they let themselves feel it, to be seen all their messy selves, and to see another human being in theirs. And in that mutual gazing, real love is formed, because love is not meant to always be comfortable. Love is meant to be purifying. Love is meant to tear down the barriers that keep you isolated from yourself and others. It's not here to validate your perfection. It's here to encourage you to accept your humanity. When you gaze into the mirror of love, you don't merely see your imperfections, you see your potential. You see the person you could be if you cease to flee, cease to hide, cease to pretend that you're invincible. And the beauty of it is, love does not merely reveal your wounds, it heals them. So don't be afraid of the mirror. Don't flee from the reflection. Because it's often the love that pushes you that's the love that will transform you. It's not there to steal your power. It's there to assist you in taking it back. And when the avoidant finally sees that love was never the foe, that it was just ever revealing the truth that they needed to confront, that's when all shifts. That's when they cease to guard their heart and begin living out of it. Because love was never attempting to destroy them, it was always attempting to liberate them. Somewhere along the way, we learned that needing someone makes us vulnerable, that being independent is strength, and being dependent is weakness. We idealize the lone wolf, the individual who never seeks assistance, the one who insists, I'm fine, even if they're shattering on the inside. But let me say something to you. That's not strength. That's pride camouflaged as fear. The reality is, requiring someone does not make you weak, it makes you human. It indicates that you've opened your heart sufficiently to allow someone to mean something to you. It means that you've permitted yourself to feel connection, and connection is not dependency. Basis of a life worth living. We all enter this world in need of others. As infants, we quite literally can't live without attachment. We require to be held, loved, comforted. Yet somewhere along the line between childhood and adulthood, we're instructed to close that side of ourselves off, to be strong, to never need another person. But that ain't strength, that's isolation, that's starvation of the heart, pretending to be self-sufficiency. And that's what the avoidant learns the hard way. They spend years thinking they're safest when they rely on no one, that if they never need, they'll never be disappointed. But in not wanting to be disappointed, they also don't want to be intimate. They don't want to feel joy. They don't want to feel the deep satisfaction that only comes from being seen, supported, and loved. See is not about how good you are at holding it together on your own. It's how much you can open up and still hold your ground. It's being open enough to invite someone in without losing yourself along the way. That balance, that's power. Needing someone doesn't mean you can't survive without them. It means your soul recognizes something familiar in theirs. It means they awaken something in you that makes life richer, deeper, more real. And that's not weakness. That's expansion. When you really care for someone, you're not exclaiming, I can't live without you. You're saying life is more perfect when we develop together. You're recognizing that love, support, and connection make you more of yourself. They do not lessen you. They lift you up. The avoidant finally comes to understand that autonomy without intimacy is nothing more than disguised loneliness. That walls constructed for protection become what isolate, that the very thing they were attempting to avoid. Vulnerability is the path to all they've ever wanted: belonging, comprehension, love. And it is brave to own up to that. It requires strength to utter, I need you. Not because you are incomplete, but because you want to give your completeness to another human being. That is what maturity entails, not denying you care, but standing in your authenticity and saying, I do. Real strength isn't cold, it's not detached, it's not pretending you're unbothered. Real strength is soft but steady. It's the ability to feel deeply and still stay grounded. To say, I love you, even when it scares you. To risk connection knowing it could hurt, but choosing it anyway because it's worth it. When you quit believing that requiring someone is weakness, you begin to appreciate the loveliness of partnership. You understand that leaning on a person doesn't equal falling off your balance beam. It equals trusting that when you stumble, you won't fall alone. And that trust, that surrender, that vulnerability, that's where life begins to feel whole again. So to the avoidant, to the one who's spent years pretending they don't need anyone, it's okay to let go. It's okay to reach out. It's okay to need, because needing isn't weakness. It's connection in motion. It's the language of the soul saying, I'm ready to live fully. And that's when everything starts to change, when they finally lay the armor down, when they finally say, I need you. Not out of desperation, but out of honesty. The walls come down and love finally gets to breathe. That is not weakness. That is the ultimate strength. The strength to be vulnerable, to be exposed, and to let someone in. Growth is not in movement. It is in stillness. It starts the moment you get still, because as long as you're running, you're reacting. You're not reflecting. You're not learning. You're just surviving. But the second you stop, the second you face what you've been avoiding, that's when transformation begins. We all have something we flee from: pain, rejection, truth, responsibility. The avoidant flees from intimacy because closeness feels dangerous. But they don't know that with every step they take from pain, they are also stepping away from growth. Every time you flee from what frightens you, you reinforce the sense that you can't manage it, and that notion keeps you small. But when you finally stop, when you say, I'm done running, I'm ready to face this, something amazing happens. The fear doesn't go away, but it begins to lose its hold because fear feeds on distance. It blooms in avoidance. The minute you turn toward it, you begin to reclaim that power. That's what growth is, not the lack of fear, but rather the choice to navigate through it, to stay in the unease and grow from it rather than flee from it. That's where emotional maturity starts. The avoidant tends to think that stopping equates to surrendering, but it's the opposite. Stopping equates to taking control. It means opting for awareness instead of autopilot. It means saying, no more running from myself, because running may keep you busy, but it never makes you free. Here's the truth. Healing is not easy. Growth is not easy. The instant you leave running, all that you have been trying to avoid comes flooding in. The memories, the guilt, the regret, the longing, everything. But that's the idea. You cannot heal something that you won't feel. You cannot change what you won't touch. The pain is not there to destroy you. It's there to free you from the shackles that you have been carrying behind you. And when you sit with it, when you stand face to face with the truth and do not flee, you begin to realize that it's not so terrible after all. That creature in the dark you were afraid of is a hurt part of yourself that wants to be understood. That's where compassion comes in. That's where knowledge starts. Growth occurs in the times you desire to run most, but decide to remain. When you remain during the talk which intimidates you, when you remain with the feeling you've always repelled, when you remain present long enough to learn that your feelings will not kill you, they will emancipate you. The avoidance transformation begins there. The instant they cease to flee every difficult truth, every painful emotion, and finally allow themselves to feel life as it is, raw, messy, real. That's when they start becoming someone solid, someone aware, someone with the ability for true love. Because running establishes routine. You continue experiencing the same patterns, the same heartbreaks, the same fears in new forms. Stopping, that's change, that's ending the cycle, that's telling yourself, I prefer to grow than feel comfortable. And that's a choice that makes all the difference. It converts pain to wisdom, convinces fear to fuel, transforms avoidance to awareness. That's when you break free from being a victim of your past and become the author of your future. If you're sick of running from love, from truth, from yourself, take a breath. Be still, listen. Everything you've been running from is waiting for you in that silence. Because growth doesn't come when you go faster, it comes when you go deeper. And when the avoidant finally stops running, they don't just find peace, they find purpose. They understand that the very things they were fleeing from were the doors to their healing the entire time. And that's when life eventually opens up. Not because it became easier, because they became strong, because they were taught that you can't outrun your lessons, you can only live them. There is a place in every journey where running out of excuses is the first sign of actual growth. That's the strength of accountability. That's that moment when you no longer point fingers, not at your past, not at your parents, not at the people who harmed you, and you just say, this is on me. That is not weakness. That is freedom. See, accountability isn't blame, it's ownership. It's claiming your power back from whatever you've been blaming for years. Because the second you own your patterns, your reactions, your decisions, that's the second you own your future. For the avoidant, this is a hard pill to swallow. They've been telling themselves for so long that they were justified in their distance. I just don't do emotions. I'm better on my own. People always let me down. Those sound like reasons, but they're really defenses, and defenses are fears in disguise. Accountability takes all that away and says one very simple thing: what role did you play in your own pain? That's a tough question, but it's the sort that can change your life, because until you own it, you remain stuck in the same story. You can't rewrite what you won't claim. Accountability says, yes, I've been hurt, but I also made choices. I pushed people away. I closed off. I avoided the hard conversations. And now I'm ready to change that. That moment, that truth is where change happens. Because you can't grow from guilt. You can grow from the awareness of things. It's not about blaming yourself for what you've done. It's about knowing it so deeply that you never have to do it again. The avoidant comes to see that accountability is not punishment. It's freedom. It's freedom from the need to live as life is happening to you. And instead, living as life is happening through you. It's the moment you move from reactive to intentional. You stop being reactive and say, this is just who I am. And you become intentional and start asking, who do I want to become? And that adjustment, that little adjustment in words, makes all the difference. Because when you take responsibility, you cease to give your power away. You cease to let your past control your actions. You cease to let fear pen your narrative. You understand that, yes, perhaps you've been avoiding love. Perhaps you've been sabotaging relationships. That doesn't make you who you are. It merely tells you where you have been. Responsibility grants you the authority to decide where you're going from there. And it's not perfect. It's not getting everything right. It's about getting real, about saying, I did that, I said that, I hurt someone because I was hurting. That kind of honesty takes more courage than denial ever will, because denial is comfortable, but it holds you captive. Accountability is uncomfortable, but it frees you. See, real relationships, real healing, real success, they all demand accountability. Without it, you'll continue to do the same old things with new faces, wondering why things never change. But when you finally take ownership of your part, the whole thing shifts because awareness gives you choice and choice gives you power. The avoidant understands that accountability is the pathway back to connection. When they can hold up and say, I pushed you away because I was scared, or I closed down because I didn't know how to be vulnerable, that's not weakness. That's bravery. That's maturity. That's healing in process. And here's the gorgeous part. Accountability doesn't only fix your relationships with other people, it fixes your relationship with yourself. Because every time you own up, you rebuild self-trust. You demonstrate to yourself that you're no longer hiding. You're showing up. You're growing. So if you'd like to transform your life, don't wait for apologies. Don't wait for closure. Don't wait for someone else to change. Take responsibility. Because the second you say, it's my responsibility to grow, you're no longer waiting for rescue. You're building results. That's when true freedom starts, not when everything works out, but when you choose to own everything that doesn't, because that's where all your power resides, in the gap between what occurred to you and what you do in response to it. Sometimes the universe delivers people not to stay, to stir something within you. They enter your life as light, as love, as lessons. And if you're not prepared, if you're still hiding, still running, you can lose them. Not because they grew tired, because your walls wouldn't let their light in. That's one of the most difficult to accept, that you can lose those who were sent to heal you. The ones who pierced your armor, the ones who loved you beyond your defenses, the ones who didn't want to fix you just to hold space for you. And when you send them away, when you shut off, when you opt for silence instead of vulnerability, one day they stop knocking. And that silence is different. It's not peace, it's regret. The avoidant does realize this too late. They believe they have time. They believe that person will always be there, waiting, comprehending, pardoning. But love has its limits when it's not reciprocated. Even the most loving hearts tire of being probed. Even the most forbearing spirits finally come to understand they can't cure someone else's fear. And that's when the truth hits hard. Because now, the one they fled from no longer exists. The warmth that once filled their existence is now gone, and in its place is coldness. They turn around, and all that remains is the reverberation of what might have been. And for the very first time, the avoidant isn't alone anymore. They feel the price of avoidance. It's a heartless irony. The person they drove away to spare themselves from suffering is the one who causes them their greatest suffering. But this is the thing, that isn't punishment. That's life giving them one of its most valuable lessons. You can't accept love with closed fists. You can't grasp connection with clenched hands. Sometimes the loss of the person who was supposed to cure you is the only thing powerful enough to force you to confront yourself. Because pain requires notice. Regret requires examination. And in that quiet, they finally begin to realize what they couldn't earlier, that love was never the danger. It was the remedy, and they wouldn't take it. But even in that defeat, there's beauty. Because the mission of those individuals, the ones who were sent to heal you, wasn't ever simply to remain. It was to be able to reveal to you what was possible, to remind your heart what true love felt like, to leave an impression so strong that when you finally awaken, you will know the next opportunity at love for what it is: sacred. The avoidant learns that love does not wait indefinitely, and healing is not done alone. Growth comes with a timeline, and if you push away the people life sends to assist you in growing, eventually you exhaust all opportunities to make it right. But that truth, as much as it hurts, is the gate to transformation. Because sometimes it takes losing something real to realize how precious it was. Times it takes an end to truly appreciate the depth of what you had. That's the awakening. When regret turns into responsibility, when the lesson finally hits You can't keep pushing away the very thing you want most. And from that hurt, if they will, arises a new type of strength, not the strength to stay away, but the strength to open, the strength to be present next time differently, to love with presence rather than fear, to know that healing does not always come dressed in comfort. Sometimes it comes in disguise of heartbreak. Yes, you can lose people that were sent to heal you, but if you learn the lesson, if you take that loss and turn it into awareness, then perhaps, just perhaps, you won't lose yourself next time. Because the greatest tragedy isn't losing them. The true tragedy is losing the version of you that could have grown through love. But the greatest redemption, it's when you grab that pain, that loss, that wake up call, and use it to become someone finally able to receive what life attempted to give you all along: forgiveness. One of the most difficult things you will ever do, yet one of the freest, most powerful acts you'll ever experience. Because forgiveness isn't about getting the other person off the hook. It's about taking the hook out of your own heart. Saying, I'm not going to carry this weight anymore. To see when someone avoids you, hurts you, or walks away from your love, it's easy to let anger take over. It's easy to build resentment, to replay every conversation in your head, to ask yourself, how could they? But the truth is, holding on to that pain doesn't punish them. It poisons you. Every time you relive the moment, every time you replay the story, you're reinforcing the wound. Forgiveness is the only thing that breaks that cycle. But let's be clear, forgiveness does not equal forgetting. It doesn't mean pretending it didn't occur or allowing the person back into your life in the same manner. Forgiveness means taking the lesson, holding on to the wisdom, and letting go of the bitterness. It means saying, I remember what you taught me, but I no longer let it define me. That's the balance. Forgive, but don't forget the lesson, because the pain you've endured wasn't wasted. It molded you, it awakened you, it taught you what you deserve, what you'll never accept again, and what real connection feels like. That's not something to erase, that's something to honor. For the avoidant, forgiveness starts when they finally own up, when they break free from running and say, I hurt people who tried to love me. But for the one who loved them, forgiveness is releasing the expectation that things could have been different. It's letting go of the narrative that keeps you stuck in what was so you can find space for what's next. You see, forgiveness isn't an event, it's a process. Some days it feels easy. Other days it feels impossible. You'll think you've let go and then something will trigger the memory again. That's okay. Healing is cyclical. What matters is that every time it resurfaces, you choose to respond differently. You breathe. You remind yourself, I don't need closure from them to move on. I give it to myself. And here's the thing that most people overlook. Forgiveness isn't necessarily about another individual. Sometimes it's about forgiving yourself. For not knowing then, for setting boundaries you didn't, for loving someone who couldn't return it. You did the best you could with what you knew at the time, and now you know better. Present of pain, it renders you wiser, softer, more powerful at the same time. Forgiving doesn't take away your power, it returns it. Because when you're no longer stuck in resentment, you regain your energy. You no longer live in reaction to another person's actions. You begin living from choice, from understanding, from peace. And that peace, that's power. The avoidant, too, learns this on their path. That forgiveness doesn't erase the past, but it invites redemption. It's not about rewriting the story. It's about claiming it, learning from it, loving better the next time. So whether you're the one who was avoided or the one who did the avoiding, forgiveness is your bridge back to freedom. But don't erase the lesson. Don't forget the wisdom that pain gave you, because the lesson is what turns your wound into wisdom, your hurt into healing, your past into purpose. And that's how you keep going, not bitter, but better, not closed, but conscious. You walk with scars that speak volumes, not of weakness, but of survival. And you hold the quiet strength that can only be found by saying, I forgive, I've learned, and I'm free. Because forgiveness does not necessitate you returning, it means you move forward. Transformation does not occur in the light, it occurs in the darkness. It occurs when silence becomes so deafening you can no longer ignore it. When the one who used to flee sits still long enough to feel, that is when awareness starts. That is when actual change begins. Awareness isn't about judgment. It's not like saying, I should have been smarter, or I ruined everything. It's about seeing clearly, without shame, without filters, without apologies. It's about finally realizing why you did what you did and knowing you don't have to live that way anymore. Because when awareness arrives, patterns lose control. The avoidant, for the first time, connect the dots. They realize the walls they built weren't protection, they were prisons. They see how fear disguised itself as independence, how avoidance pretended to be strength. And that awareness stings, but that sting is sacred because it means you're waking up. It means the armor is cracking and the true you who loves deeply, feels fully, and craves connection are finally breaking through. Transformation is not about becoming someone different. It's about going back to who you've been all along, beneath the fear, the child who one time loved without reservation, the soul that once trusted in connection, the heart that once had faith and love without an attempt to control it. That's the essence you come back to through awareness. And the lovely thing, awareness doesn't just change the way you view yourself, it changes the way you view all others. You cease to call people toxic or needy and begin to see their hurt. You cease to respond from wounds and begin to respond from wisdom. You cease to flee from love and begin to realize that connection isn't danger. It's the very thing that mends. But transformation through awareness requires courage because it's not a one-time epiphany. It's a choice you make every day. You wake up each morning and have to say, I won't let my old story drive today's life. You have to stop interrupting the patterns that kept you safe before. You have to remain present when it would be easier to numb yourself. Presence requires awareness, and presence is the most potent action of love you can offer to others and to yourself. For the avoidant, awareness is the breakthrough. It's where they no longer say, that's just who I am, but begin to say, that's who I was, not who I have to be. It's where they start extending themselves rather than withdrawing, opening up rather than closing off. They start substituting distance with vulnerability, fear with honesty, and silence with truth. And that's where love begins to develop. You see, change isn't loud. It doesn't arrive with fireworks or claps. It arrives quietly during those seconds when you finally speak the truth, when you opt to stay rather than leave, when you forgive, when you listen, when you open your heart once more, even when it's been broken. That is change in action. And the strongest part, once you can see clearly, you can never return to darkness. Awareness transforms your chemistry, your energy, your life. You start attracting differently, loving differently, living differently, because you're no longer coming from fear, you're living from freedom. That's the path from dodging to seeing, from terror to liberation, from fleeing to coming home. It's not simple, flawless, but it's authentic. And that's what counts, because the instant you awaken to who you truly are, to the reality of your patterns, to the love that's been waiting for you to let it in, that's the instant everything shifts. So if you're listening to this right now, understand this awareness is the birthplace of every miracle. It's the moment life opens its arms and says, welcome home, and maybe, just maybe, that's what this entire journey has been about. Not losing someone else, but finding yourself, because when the avoidant finally comes to understand they need you, what they're actually learning is that they finally need themselves. And from this realization, all else follows.